Scripture bears that out. And we've studied that just a few Wednesday nights ago. Seems to me, though, that Solomon is saying to us, I really thought I could. I thought I could keep my wisdom and still gratify my flesh with wine. And it's like he's saying, when he gets to the back end of this lesson, hey, I was wrong. It doesn't work that way. But I did want to make a comment on that because, man, sometimes some folks in my studies got really tripped up with that and went to great lengths to try to explain that away. I think that's just Solomon saying, that's what I thought in my foolishness, trying to search for meaning apart from God. So he goes on, picking up in verse 4. I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit. I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. Well, he talks about his great works, houses, vineyards, gardens, orchards, all these different kinds of fruit trees, water pools for irrigation purposes and things like that. And I tend to agree with J.B. Kaufman in his commentary. He says, there are a lot of commentators that will spend a great deal of time here discussing all those works of Solomon. I'm not saying there's no benefit or profit in that, but we've talked about that before when we studied Kings, and I think COVID happened right when we were getting ready to study Chronicles, so we may not have studied Chronicles yet as far as working our way through Hebrew history, but I know we studied Kings and we studied the life of Solomon, and we talked a lot about those works, and so I won't go over all those, but a number of different works that Solomon had and made, and it's not to say he did these himself, but commissioned them. We understand that. So let's just pick up in verse 7 and move forward. And again, we can see those works in other passages and study those and have studied those before. But he says, I got me servants and maidens and had servants born in my house. And also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. Here he says he had servants, and I don't know. I think it was Kaufman that made the statement in verse 7 that he says, I acquired male and female servants, had servants born in my house, greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. He says, well, those servants that he had, they were just the same to him as flocks and herds. They were just possessions. I don't know. Maybe. I don't think you can say one way or the other from this verse. Solomon did put some folks under tribute and put them under forced labor. But it was some of those foreigners that Israel had been instructed before by God when they came into the land to drive out because of their idolatry. Did Solomon just think that they were worthless, that they were just possessions? I don't know. I don't know that there's anything. With Solomon at this point in his search, it wouldn't be that surprising, but I also hesitate to make an accusation like that against someone without better evidence. And I just don't see in that verse particularly evidence for that necessarily. But he says, I gathered myself silver and gold. What does the Bible tell us? I can't remember if it's in Kings account or Chronicles about gold and silver in the reign of Solomon. In fact, somebody may have a cross-reference in your Bible there. You might have a cross-reference to it. I was looking over here on my app for a cross-reference, and I'm thinking of my computer app.
In those verses you just read off, there's a lot of individualism and no recognition that God supplied those things to him. It's like he's looking at this part of his life that, God's not in my life
I know. That's interesting. You're a step ahead of me. I'm gonna circle back around to that. So hang on to that thought. But the Bible tells us that in Solomon's reign, it was the wealthiest time in the history of the kingdom of Israel. In fact, particularly silver was like stones. If you've ever been over to the Bible lands, that area, you'll know if there's one thing they have in abundance other than sand, it's stone. So to say silver was like stones, and we understand there's some hyperbole there, some exaggeration for emphasis, but that's the wealth of Solomon's kingdom. It's also interesting in verse 8, special treasures of kings and of the provinces. It says, I acquired male and female singers. There's a phrase here. It's the same, every version I've looked at so far. I haven't looked at just a ton of them, but at least New King James, ASV, King James, this phrase, the delights of the sons of men. It's a tactful, it's a nicer way of referencing Solomon's harem. What was it, 700 wives, 300 concubines? And he says, physical pleasure here, wine, mirth, sexual pleasure. I mean, I had servants waiting on me hand and foot. Just all these different things, and I don't think I had caught that until studying for this particular chapter, and looking, might have been Kaufman that I saw, and I was like, But just about every commentator that I've seen says that's just a euphemism, a nicer way of saying his harem. So he's just talking about how he's tried all these different things. Musical instruments, some folks are not as into music, but some people may be, but he says it was a big thing in kings' courts and things like that back then. Even tried that. So picking up at verse 9, then I want to come back to Robert's thought that he made, or his point that he made. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Well, again, I'd say that's debatable in one sense. But we also need to realize, and I meant to mention this up there at verse, 3? Wisdom is a word it's also flexible. It can mean wisdom. We tend to use wisdom to mean what? A lot of times we, I don't know if I'd say contrast it, but we compare it at least with knowledge. Knowledge it's just what you know. It's facts. But wisdom is what? As we use it. Yeah, it's applying it in a right way. That we say, boy, here's a person who's wise. You could have two people with the same knowledge, one wise, one foolish, and two very different behaviors, very different outcomes, and so on. Sometimes in the Bible, though, wisdom is used of knowledge, and especially expertise. Typically is the way when it's used in more referencing knowledge. And the more I study Solomon, and I told y'all I didn't really necessarily intend to end up 2 quarters at the same time in a study of Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, but it's had me thinking a lot over the last several weeks about Solomon. And the more I study Solomon, the more I think that's a good portion of his wisdom is that expertise type knowledge, very technical knowledge. I don't think that's the extent of it, because he does say when he asks for wisdom, this your people, I mean, it's such a great nation. I don't know how to go in or come out. I need help in being able to guide these people. But even with a person who may be wise, again, maybe not as we would use that word, wise. We might even say something like shrewd. Is it true that there are people, because they have good perception of human behavior and so on, that they can use that in business to take advantage of people, to cheat people, and to get rich off of that. There's a sense in which that's wisdom, but they're using it for ill purposes. Same person or a different person with the same type of abilities could use that for good. I might even use that to help convert souls to Christ and so on. So you see how some of, and that's where it gets difficult, because some of Solomon's knowledge definitely was that technical expertise. Some of it was, ability to lead and things like that. But if you turn your heart away from God, you'll go a different direction with even that wisdom to lead people and so on and so forth. So, in a sense, did his wisdom remain with him? Absolutely. But he's going to use it in different ways when he's leaving God out of the equation. And so that's the idea there, verse 9. Verse 10, whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. In other words, finish the statement. He says, if I wanted it, I got it. If I wanted it, I took it. If it seemed pleasurable, I partook of it. Whatever I wanted, I got it. And again, Solomon's in a position where he can do that. And so he says, verse 11, then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit, there's our phrase, under the sun. It was emptiness. It was worthless. It's like trying to take smoke or fog, vapor in your hand. It's impossible under the sun, without God, in other words. So Solomon's, it's like he's standing before us. He says, you think, oh man, if I had all the physical pleasure, I'd be happy. If I could have all the liquor I wanted, I'd be happy. If I had people to wait on me hand and foot, all the food I wanted, if I could build these great grand building projects and things like that, boy, that would give me some meaning in my life and purpose. He says, no, I tried that, all of that, and it's worthless. Now back to Robert's point that he made just a moment ago. What did you said? This is all very. What was the word you used? Individualism, individualistic. I had written down in my notes, and I didn't go back. I meant to, and I just realized last night I meant to when I was doing some study right before I went to bed, and I forgot. I meant to go and count for myself. But according to James Burton Kaufman, in these first 11 verses, I, my, me, and mine are used 32 times. 32 times. I mean, that is incredible. Now again, remember, he's describing his experiment. The Solomon that's, when he's finishing up his sermon, his lesson, his book, would tell you that Solomon, that earlier Solomon was an idiot. He didn't know anything. But right now he's saying, I did this, I did that. I, me, my, mine. By the way, it reminds you of anything? Jesus talked about. I'm telling you, man, that's another thing. The more I studied this book, there are references in the New Testament that I don't know if I could tell you with 100% certainty, but I think Jesus had to be thinking of Solomon. I mean, he's almost certain. And I think of Luke 12. And he talks about this rich fool. And he says, he has a bumper crop, and he says, whoa, what am I going to do? I tell you what I know. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear down my barns. I'm going to build bigger barns, store it up, and I'm going to say, Saul, you just take it easy. Now I can retire. Sometimes people say that, right? If I could just get out of the rat race, retire, I'd be happy. He says, I'm going to retire. Just take it easy. And God says, thou fool. Tonight your soul be required of you. And then, whose will those things be that you've stored up so selfishly for none but yourself? Yes, sir.
First Corinthians, Paul talking to Corinthians, talks about pretty much the same things. The wisdom of the world is foolishness to God, for it is written, He catches the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, and they are few.
Yeah, vanity. God knows the thoughts of the wise, so-called wise of this world. It's vanity. And so, man, as Robert said, very individualistic here. I think it was also Kaufman, he was quoting from somebody, but he said, I'm paraphrasing, kind of, it was commenting, I think, on maybe verse 11 or earlier in this section, but I just kind of thought on this whole section here. The pleasure addict, the one addicted to pleasure, in other words, seeking meaning in life through just purely fleshly pleasure. He cannot escape the morning after. Boy, how true that is. Or the insatiable appetite of the flesh. You can't escape that. You try to find meaning, contentment, purpose in life through just pleasure. You can't escape the morning after. You can't escape that insatiable appetite of the flesh. Adam, you were going to say something?
I don't know. When you were reading verse 10, it got me thinking about how much did he realize and understand what his dad did to get his mom?
Yeah.
And it's the same type of thing. As my eyes desired it, I went and I took it. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of this stuff I'm reading, I'm like, what was Bathsheba like? Like maybe she was on the rooftop on purpose. Who knows? But I don't know. The more I'm reading this, the more I'm like, man, that sounds like the worst situation in David's life, that he didn't make the right decision, and now he's going, I want to see what can happen. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen if I do the same thing my dad did?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's, yeah. And I mean, like I said, I don't know for sure, but that is an interesting thought because, yeah, I mean, actions have consequences, sometimes far-reaching consequences, even on down, and maybe that influenced him. I don't know. It is, there's so many things here that you just, man, there are so many questions that I would love to sit down with Solomon and kind of interview him, I guess, for lack of a better term, and ask some of those very questions like that. All right, let's pick up at the end of the wise and the fool here, beginning at verse 12, and see if, I don't know if we'll get through the chapter or not, but I was hoping to. So he says, I turn myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king? Even that which hath been already done. Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. Well, at least he's got that much going for him, right? At this point. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. What is that? Death. So now he's starting to get down in the dumps again. You see a lot of, it's almost, sometimes it feels almost bipolar as you walk through Ecclesiastes. Sometimes he'll get up and talk about some of the good things he had going, and then it's just like, it'll just crash. Yes, sir.
You know, when you read the beginning of chapter 2 through 11, it's almost like as he's writing, as he's weeping with regret.
Yeah.
He's just weeping. I mean, you know, if you've ever written a letter to yourself about regrets, I mean, could you imagine writing this and realizing and knowing that the life that he lived is what he's writing?
And it's interesting because, I mean, think about an autobiography. There are autobiographies out there of people that have been in high positions of authority or highly visible, at least in the country, if not in the world, positions, and made some serious blunders, mistakes, maybe even lost it all. And sometimes they'll write an autobiography, and sometimes they'll do this. They'll kind of work through all their mistakes. The difference being, a lot of times as they do that, they'll be telling you all along, I decided to test my heart with this, thinking it would bring me happiness. But it didn't. But Solomon's just going to walk us through it. And he'll come around to that conclusion at the end to say, and it's almost like it's almost like he's saying to people, maybe he's speaking to people that he's anticipating they think some of these things are going to bring happiness. Okay, so let me just start off by telling you all everything's worthless. I said I'm gonna find meaning in life and pleasure. And so, boy, I had building projects, I had fleshly gratification, I had wine, I had servants. And he's going to walk through several of these things, and eventually at the end, he'll come back around to that. But yeah, it's, you can imagine, if we're right about Solomon and this kind of being his repentance, yeah, I can imagine him writing with tears as he says some of these things. So he says this one event happens to them all. Pick up at verse 15. Then said I in my heart, as it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this also is vanity. Remember that Hebrew word, hevel. It's smoke, vapor, fog. For there is no remembrance of the wise man, more of the fool forever. Seeing that which now is in the days to come seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how died the wise man? As the fool. Some of the things he's saying here, he's kind of like melancholy in the dumps, but some of this isn't really true, at least not to the extent that he's making out to be. I just lost the spot I was looking at when I said that. There's no remembrance, verse 16, there's no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever. That's not necessarily true. In fact, who wrote this? What human wrote those words? Solomon. When did Solomon live? I mean, it's like 900 BC, right? We're living in 2025. Close to 3,000 years later, we're still talking about him. I don't think he was quite right about that. But you see where he's kind of getting down as he's thinking like, am I even going to be remembered? But do you see there? He's seeking meaning in that even. Does it really matter if people remember you, me, others after we're gone from this life for a year, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, a million years if the world stands? That doesn't matter. What matters is God going to remember me? Is God going to recognize me on the day of judgment and say, well done, enter thou into the joy of thy Lord? He's just getting all worked up over, oh, am I even going to be remembered? So he says, I hated life, verse 17. I have in my notes, what else could result from a life without God? You're going to hate it. It's grievous, it's empty, it's painful, it's profitless, vain, like grasping for smoke or wind. So I hated life, he says, verse 17, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there's a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity, yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and a great evil. Guy works himself silly. He works his fingers to the bone, we sometimes say. And what happens? He dies eventually, and it's going to go to somebody else. And he might be a fool and squander it all. And oh, whose did Solomon's go to? Rehoboam. What did Rehoboam do with it? Build it up, increase it, invest it? No. In fact, it wasn't long before King Shishak, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, came from Egypt and Oh man, those shields that Solomon had made. What were they made from? Gold, pure gold. They weren't shields for war, folks. Those were decorations. King of Egypt comes and he takes them. What does Rehoboam do? Well, now, don't get upset, kids. We can replace that. You know, sometimes parents would say something like that, and then they get you like a cheap imitation because maybe you can't afford really to replace it. He makes shields of brass. Don't y'all worry, we'll replace those shields. I know he came and mean old king of Egypt came and took our shields away, but we'll replace them with brass. So a lot of what he's worried about here, he's got good reason. So he says, what hath man of all his labor, verse 22, and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. He can't even sleep at night. That's how it is sometimes. Sleepless nights of the godless rich. There's nothing better for a man, verse 24 says, than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight, wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. We'll make some comments on those individual verses. I want to get through that section just to note that he's got a lot of worries here, fears about what's going to happen to all that he's amassed after he's gone. He's seeking meaning in that. And really, Ecclesiastes as a whole, but especially this chapter, this section, ought to shake us, shake sense into us, but especially to an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, as it pictures, it portrays the utter misery, despair, worthlessness, vanity of a life without God. We'll come back and make some comments on these verses, God willing, next Sunday. Thank y'all very much. We'll have a break before worship this morning.